making the time today. Really appreciate it.
All right,
Ben, you ready?
let's get rolling. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Ben Gordon. I'm the Executive Director of Central Oregon LandWatch. I'll serve as today's moderator for a discussion about Central Oregon's response to wildfire prevention and management. Joining me today are representatives from federal, state, and local governments, as well as local experts who are going to share their perspectives on how we prepare for wildfire seasons to come here in Central Oregon. Let's start with a round of introductions. Glad to have you all here. Thank you for spending your time. If you wouldn't mind sharing your name, your affiliation, and any relevant experience for today's conversation. And how about if we start with you, Mayor Kebler?
Sure, yeah. Happy to be here today. I'm Melanie Kebler. I am the mayor of Bend.
Bill Chang, Deschutes County Commissioner. Maybe more importantly, I helped build and facilitate the Deschutes Collaborative Forest Project early on.
My name is Bob Madden. I'm retired from Wildfire, 33 years there. And my entire career, I've been involved in wildland fire incident management teams. So I've had the opportunity over the last 45 plus years to see the changes.
My name is Kathryn Osborne, Redmond City Councilor. I'm part of a wildfire family. My husband has wildfire for 26 years. I worked in an administrative capacity for a few years, and I'm also a volunteer and event organizer with the Wildland Firefighter Foundation and Spouses of Partners of Wildland Firefighters.
Gavin, Coble, I'm the Central Oregon Field Representative for Senator Jeff Merkley. That encompasses Wheeler, Jefferson, Crook, Deschutes, Lake, and Klamath counties.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Mickey Harvey. I am the Central Oregon Field Rep for Congresswoman Janelle Bynum. Before that, I spent 3.5 years with Senator Merkley's office in DC working on public lands, natural resources, appropriations, tribes, and emergency management.
I'm Anthony Broadman, State Senator for Central Oregon. My district is most of Deschutes County, then Redmond, Sisters, Blackbutte, Eagle Crest, Tumalo. And thrilled to be here. I served with Bob and with Commissioner Chang on the Deschutes Collaborative Steering Committee, which was I think another example of Central Oregon leading on wildfire resilience. And in the Senate, I serve as chair of the Senate Committee on Finance and Revenue.
Great. It's so good to have you all here today. Thank you. We have a short amount of time for what I think will be a robust discussion. I have some question prompts that I'll seed the discussion with, but I know that everybody has a lot of insights to share, so let's just see where it goes. I'll try to keep us on topic and keep us on time. So we have about 30 minutes, and once we're done, we'll open it up to questions from the media. So here's the first question. How has wildfire danger and wildfire season changed here in Central Oregon during the last 20 years? And what effect has climate change played? Let's start with you, Bob.
Well, in Central Oregon, we always have a fire season, and we've had severe fires even prior to the climate change, just due to our hot, dry summers. But what we're seeing across the entire Northwest is areas that haven't been impacted before having severe fire seasons. The higher elevations, the west side forests, and that is exacerbating the problem because of the sheer drawdown of resources. So what we're seeing is the real changes in forest health due to the impacts of not so much pure drought, but swings from drought to wet winters, but the temperatures, especially during the summertime, we get early snow melt. So that expands that early part of fire season and it extends late into October. So we went from maybe a 3-month fire season to a 5 or 6 month fire season. And within that, many more days of severe fire weather, where we might, 20 years ago, we might have had, even in Central Oregon, 5 days that we would consider really severe days, really bad days to have a wildfire. Now we're seeing we have 30 to 40 days of that. And so that exposure, and then you add to it the greater landscape. We're including the entire west side of the Cascades, which we had 20 years ago. And then we get these fires on the west side, they're big events, the heavy timber fuels, the steep terrain, these turn into long duration events. And then those long duration events in turn impact the air quality through the entire Northwest, not just Central Oregon. But we're very vulnerable because those westerly winds take that smoke off the Willamette and dump it right into Central Oregon. So we have the health aspects also. But the severity of the fire seasons, most especially is, in my mind, is that there's greater landscape impacted than it was 20 years ago, and our summers are hotter. And that in turn makes an early snow melt, and it desiccates the fuels to an extent we've not seen before.
Right.
And then on top of that, we have the forest health issues of disease, insect disease outbreaks due to leafing trees and all of that.
So quite a few changes in just a short amount of time, 20 years.
Yeah, and I kind of look at it more over a 30-plus year perspective. We started seeing the changes in fire behavior probably in the late 80s to early 90s.
Great.
And that was maybe dedicated to forest health, but now we've got those climate impacts that just add to the problem.
A lot to think about. Thank you. Let's hear from some other members of the roundtable. How about you, Councilor Osborne?
I'd say through the city of Redmond, we've had an increase in the number of fires that are directly impacting our municipality. And that is multi-level of those effects. So I'll speak a little bit to our Houston fire that just affected our town. It was in June. It started in the late afternoon, those higher winds, the heat of the day. It started right outside of town, and our children had just gotten home from school. Parents weren't home from work yet. And the wind and the heat of that fire, it spread very rapidly, and it triggered our power to go down, which then caused a hard stop on our water pumps, which in turn then caused a pressure backup, and our pipes burst right on Airport Way. So this caused a large sinkhole. It shut down our city, but in addition, we had children at home alone, so we had a fear impact. And so now the fear of the storms and the lightning and the heat and the wind will stick with our children for a very long time. We had, our city then had evacuations. We had our seniors coming into town trying to find a place to go with their trailers and their animals. And now we have a real infrastructure financial concern that we have to deal with and recuperate. And as these impacts increase, we really have to think about what's going to happen as we continue to have climate affect our emotional and financial and infrastructure needs of our municipality.
Thank you. Mayor Kebler, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say, when I was growing up in Bend, I don't remember a smoky summer. I don't remember days on end on a Labor Day weekend where I couldn't go outside, right? So I think people who've been here a while, who have studied this, can tell you that it is worse than it has been, and that a lot of that is due to the hotter, drier summers. And I'm glad that you mentioned the fires on the other side of the mountains. Those affect us with that smoke, right, and the air quality. So that's incredibly impactful for Bend's economy and for the quality of life and health of everybody in Bend. And I think we are seeing as electeds more attention to this, more worry about wildfire, to Kathryn's point, and more requests for the government to do something about this.
Thank you. Senator Broadman, I think.
Yeah, I would echo my colleagues' thoughts on this and just add, this is an existential challenge to our economic development picture. If you go on Zillow now and you look at a house in Sisters, which is in my district, it'll tell you what the chances that this home is going to be affected by conflagration in the next 15 years. We need to grow sustainably in order to continue to grow our economy and make sure that Central Oregonians have great jobs and a place to live as we grow. And I would say that wildfire and smoke are becoming a real threat to that growth, that sustainable growth. The other big picture issue that I would just highlight is that wildfire is a revenue existential challenge. When we look at where we're going to find the revenue to do the mitigation we need to prevent conflagrations from taking out cities and communities in our region, and we look at the rapidly escalating cost of suppression, our general fund is not built as a state to weather those types of storms. So our job in the legislature with our federal partners and local partners and tribal partners is to make sure that we're planning for the economic reality that we're going to be spending a lot more money on mitigation, on prevention, as well as on suppression. And I think if we keep our focus on that, because the climate chaos is making life more expensive.
Great, thank you. I'm curious, Mickey and or Gavin, what are you hearing from constituents about this?
Yeah, I will say, to echo the mayor's points, growing up here, I don't have a memory of this either. And since starting this role, we've had, this year was a very nice year, but it caught everyone's attention, I think for the wrong reasons. Of like, wow, the sky was blue a lot this summer. But I know that, the most common thing I hear from constituents when we speak about fire is, regardless of how long they've been here, they just say, I don't remember this happening. I don't remember, again, to the mayor's points of, everyone wants to go outside in the summer and enjoy the outdoors here, and people say, I don't remember having to be inside for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and sometimes a month, right? You'll lose all of August sometimes to enjoy the outdoors. So that's the most common thing I hear from constituents is folks just saying, I don't remember it being this bad.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just echo that. The folks that I've talked to, right, they talk about wildfire as a economic threat, not only like a personal health and safety threat. Because, you have your businesses shut down. People, when it's smoky outside, they don't want to go outside. And that causes real economic harm. And I've spoken with folks in Sisters and in Bend and in Redmond about, what they're seeing in the summertime. And right, a lot of businesses rely on that tourism and those tourism dollars, and you can't have that when you have smoky skies. And I would just say, when I was growing up, we had smoky summers. Like, I think after 2010, I can't remember a summer. I grew up in Medford, and I can't remember a summer where we didn't have to practice for football inside or something like that. And so I think it definitely has gotten worse just in my own lifetime.
Thank you. Something that you said, Gavin, resonated, which is that we started to notice when we had blue sky days in the summer, and we thought, okay, we're dodging a bullet here. Last summer was better than some of the other recent summers that we can remember. It still wasn't great. Examples like the Easton Fire and the Flat Fire. Curious what folks think were the lessons learned and some of the actions from the latest fire season. Would anybody like to opine on that? Perhaps we can start with you, Commissioner Chang.
Yeah, would be happy to. I specifically want to comment on the Flat Fire. One of the key lessons from the Flat Fire this summer was we can prepare for fires and mitigate the worst impacts that are possible from a fire. So at one point during the Flat Fire, there was 900 plus homes under evacuation notice at risk of being burned to the ground. And we did lose 5, which is a lot, but it is vastly less than we could have lost in that fire. And the reason that we did not lose more homes, besides heroic efforts by firefighters, was because we had done the work across the landscape. There were hundreds of homeowners who had put defensible space around their homes. There had been large landscape level fuels reduction investments in the private lands, on large private land holdings across that area. And all of that helps to break up fire, slow it down, drop it to the ground, so that it's easier to fight and it does less damage to our communities. So very, very key lesson. And every day during the Flat Fire, during the incident command meetings, they would say, we are so appreciative of all the work that people have done on their properties to help us make this firefighting efforts more successful and safer for them, frankly.
Yeah, great point. All that home hardening, property hardening that folks are doing is really making a difference. Gavin, I've heard you speak a little bit about the Flat Fire as well. Anything you'd like to add?
No, I think the Commissioner nailed everything. I think it was great to see. I was fortunate enough. Fire Marshal's office took I and a colleague out to see some of the work that these homeowners did and the effect it had on eliminating or dissipating the fire when it came up to their property line. And yeah, to the commissioner's point, these folks did the work beforehand. They were knowledgeable about the risks in the region. And I think that when we see these things, what I was thinking as well when I saw this was the other year with the Darling 3 fire east of La Pine. BLM and Forest Service took me out to show me it was literally a road. On one side of the road they had done prior treatment, burning and thinning. The other side of the road they hadn't done anything yet, and that side of the road was a near 100% destruction. There was no leaves left, there was nothing. On the other side of the road where they did do treatment, it looked almost like nothing happened to it. You saw some char marks, but that was it. And so when you see these firsthand of like these measures work, and that's where that investment needs to be spent.
Thank you. Councilor Osborne, any observations from Easton Fire?
I'd say from both Easton and Wildfire, the city had a lot of takeaways. We were grateful that we'd spent the last couple of years putting emergency management policies and procedures at the front of our conversations. I was personally at a wedding when we got the phone call that there might be some need for larger scale evacuations, and our city was ready and prepared. One of the things I thought was very interesting when we just had our city's debrief was the sheer number of county residents who then signed up to be part of alerts that weren't even in this space. And I felt like that was really important to notice that our community was starting to recognize how quickly this could impact them. And with current decreases or inability to execute mitigation contracts, we are now educating our community and really focusing on next May's Wildfire Prevention Month to make sure our community is aware of hardening, is more aware of the work they can do in their own yards, and we've been sharing that with our community. So although they were terrible events, they have been eye-opening, and I think in the future will help us be more prepared.
Thank you. Senator Broadman, anything from the state level?
Yeah, the flat fire was another example. We, for forever, right, Bob can confirm this, we've come together in Central Oregon on the mitigation side and the suppression side. We don't look at, that's a federal fire and that's a state fire. It is a fire. Our tribal partners, our local agencies, our federal agencies, our state agencies, our private fire community comes together and works to ensure that we are safe. And that's true on the collaborative, that's very true this year on House Bill 3940, which was my bill to form for the first time in the history of the state, a fund to pay for the mitigation that saved those 800 plus houses in the perimeter of the 20,000 plus acre flat fire. We need more, right? So I continue to be inspired by the spirit of this community, the bipartisanship, bicameral support that we have in the state for mitigation efforts. But we need, we need our president and we need a Republican-controlled Congress to be good partners, not deadbeat parents when it comes to putting us on our own about living with fire. Because the climate chaos is going to make mitigation more expensive. It's going to make suppression more expensive. And we're doing our part here on the ground. I know that we need good partners.
Well, great segue to my next question, which is what do we need the federal government to be doing for our communities to help reduce wildfire threats? We're doing plenty here at home, but we need more resources. Mayor Kebler, what are your thoughts?
I think there are a couple different arenas that the federal government can be involved in, should be involved in. One is on the resource side, which I think we're all going to be talking about. The other is on the policy side. What we're seeing right now is a rollback of policies, rules to deal with climate change and to deal with wildfire threats that are going to have really broad-reaching effects for our cities and for our public lands and how those are all managed. So there's sort of too many rules and changes going on to talk about them all, but the one that our council has weighed in on is the endangerment finding, which is a key finding that the EPA made that talks about how we are endangered by climate change, and wildfire is one of those threats. So I think on the policy side, it is not rolling back these crucial rules and ideas that allow the federal government to act and to support local government in addressing climate change. We can't stick our head in the sand and suddenly say, no, never mind, climate change isn't a problem. We all sit here and live it, and we all know that's not true. So the performance of rolling back these rules is not just a performance, it is a real impact to our ability to work with the federal government on these problems. And so that's why we're urging, and we put a comment in the record not to do that, and instead to talk about how do we work together to actually mitigate what's happening on the ground for our communities.
Thank you. Bob, you spent your career with boots on the ground. What do we need from the federal government?
Well, we need the money that Congress has already allocated for fuels projects, for mitigation, for building resilient landscapes, to continue that flow. We have the landscape ready to go to work. We have a workforce that would need to be bolstered somewhat to meet the goals that we have. And as far as the response, we're doing okay. We didn't have much of an impact on that, but I'm afraid that we might in the future. And especially when you look at the federal funding that goes to the states for assistance for wildfire, that's where we're losing some, and that hurts the states really bad. So it is an impact, and we need to continue to provide the funding to be able to get these mitigation jobs done, and also to support suppression activities.
Great, thank you. Mickey, how about you from the federal level looking down?
Yeah, I think, as Bob mentioned, money has been allocated to do this, right? I think one of the lessons I took away from the flat fire that folks kept, hammering home was the reason the flat fire was not worse was lots of collaboration, lots of mitigation, and a little bit of luck.
Mm-hmm.
We can't control luck, and it's not always going to be there. But the collaboration and the mitigation, preparedness, that's what we can control, and that's where our money needs to go. And the Congresswoman has a fun saying she likes to say these days is, run us our money. The state of Oregon needs this money. We know how to use it. We know where it's best used. The federal government needs to kind of pony up and give us our money.
Yeah, well said. Commissioner Chang?
Yeah, I want to echo the concerns about funding for resiliency efforts, for pre-fire mitigation, and maybe add a little bit of specifics. We have seen millions of dollars of federal funding go into private land fuels reduction and defensible space treatments through FEMA, through the USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service, through the National Fire Plan in recent decades. And some of that money we saw, actually the benefits of that during the flat fire, for example. So that's on the private land side of the equation. On the public land side of the equation, just in the last 5 years, the federal government has invested through the bipartisan infrastructure law, through the Inflation Reduction Act, over $40 million into the Deschutes National Forest through the wildfire crisis strategy. I mentioned the Deschutes Collaborative Forest Project earlier. Our job at the collaborative was to build community support so that the Forest Service could implement wide-scale fuels reduction and forest restoration works. And in the first 10 years of the Deschutes Collaborative Forest Project, we saw 100,000 acres, spanning from Black Butte Ranch all the way into South County. We saw 100,000 acres treated, and those acres helped us hold the Millie Fire at bay, hold the Pole Creek Fire at bay, hold the Bachelor Complex lava fire at bay, hold the Darlene Fire at bay, hold the Roslyn Road Fire at bay, so that we did not lose probably hundreds of homes in our community. So it's critically important for the federal government to keep investing in those fuels reduction efforts in our region. And to go to the policy end of the equation, we have seen a lot of focus from this current Congress on get rid of the environmental regulations, then we can get the work done on the ground. The problem with that, I really want to point out that is from a policy perspective, is a flawed approach, because here on the east side of the Cascade, it's dry forests, they've been logged, sometimes 3 cycles of logging. There is no valuable material in the forest. So you can take away all the regulations you want. You cannot make it financially viable to go out and treat acres just off the value of the wood that you're taking out. We need to subsidize, we need to invest in our forests to get them to a more natural, healthy, resilient condition. And that's why, for example, those $40 million of wildfire crisis strategy money were absolutely critical to getting us to where we are today.
Thank you. Councilor Osborne, anything to add?
Sure, I want to add just a little bit of a human touch to this conversation. So the federal decision-making at this point in time and the effects of the shutdown are affecting our community members in a very impactful way. So right now, it's my understanding that we are about 40% behind on our mitigation work across the country. That's the work that our firefighters, our neighbors, our husbands are supposed to be doing, and they're not at work right now, or their work is limited. This is putting financial stress on families. This is putting a lot of people on unemployment, and then with access to food being limited, this is just a spiraling, cascading effect. But in addition to that, it puts a lot of professional stress on the workforce. So we're having an exodus of the workforce for people who need to find additional sources of income to take care of their families. And then the third component of that is with the shutdown, there's not access to the training to train new firefighters who will either make our firefighting suppression and mitigation workforce more robust, but also to replace those who are having to leave. And so I'm very worried about what's happening to the families in my community.
Thank you. Yeah, this theme of the work has to persist, it has to be consistent. There's this backlog to address, and we have to be proactive in thinking, all of you representing our community, how do we keep this community safe? When there are these fits and starts, it makes it very hard to ensure continuity, and that's essential to keeping everybody safe. Mayor Kebler, a quick follow-on to something that you had said. So the City of Bend offered a resolution on the EPA's proposed rollback to the endangerment findings. Can you share what was in that resolution and why the city decided to do that?
Yeah, so we made an official comment into the record on that rulemaking, which is a super accessible way for the public to talk about federal policy, of course. But really, in wildfire is one of the huge existential reasons why it doesn't make any sense for the federal government to start saying that climate change is a thing that endangers this country and the people that live here. It is, right? And I think this we worry that this will compound the effects that we've already seen from the federal government pulling back money that we were supposed to use for mitigation, for emergency preparedness, to plan. And if we don't even have this bedrock finding that says wildfire is a threat that we can work against by combating climate change, we're not gonna see any of this funding flow, right? So that's the connection with the policy and the funding. And I think generally also this represents our communities, and I think all of our communities care about the environment, the outdoors, access to the outdoors and public lands. That is a huge value of this community, so we felt it was really appropriate to weigh in on this rule.
That's great, thank you. Senator Broadman, is there anything similar coming from the state level?
Yeah, I think you can look at, again, a very bipartisan approach to getting ready for the wildfire that's coming and addressing it sustainably once it happens. When we talk about kitchen table issues that people actually care about, this is what we're talking about. I don't want my kitchen table to burn down. And so, I mean, what I hear time and again from constituents all around each of our jurisdictions, and our delegation gets it, Representative Bynum and our senators get it. But I feel as though there is an approach, and it's nowhere more apparent in this endangerment finding, of abandoning rural Oregon and rural communities who are going to live forever with wildfire. And we need our federal partners to step up. It's abandoning rural Oregon is bad for economic development. It's bad for public safety. And it's bad for, as Councilor Osborne said, it's bad for the people in our community who rely on these jobs to bring you, Chang.
Thank you. Mickey and Gavin, it's got to be a tough time with the government shutdown, and you're probably hearing from some pretty disappointed constituents on the daily. What are the conversations coming from your offices?
That this, I think Mickey actually touched on it earlier, right? The senator is very outspoken of these funds that are already obligated or legally obligated. The president does not have the authority to deny funding that Congress allocated to these projects and to these states. He continues to push for, when we talk about bipartisanship, there's a number of bipartisan bills in Congress related to wildfire. Senator Crapo out of Idaho has been a partner with Senator Merkley many times when it comes to wildfire mitigation. With Bob, it's wordy but collaborative. Forest Landscape Restoration Program Reauthorization Act, CFLRP Act, just to make it easier. That was introduced by both of them. And that's directly to fund these programs and these organizations and these agencies on the ground. And the common argument is these funds were allocated and directed to these organizations, these agencies, these state governments because the folks on the ground know best. The folks that live on the landscape know best how to take care of the landscape. They know best of what their risks are, whether it's present or future risks. But that's what the senator continues to push, is that we have funding for this, we've allocated funding for this, and every single time it's held up, he highlights the fact that that's not legal.
Yeah, and I would just, piggyback off that, wildfires do not care who you voted for. They impact everybody, whether you voted for the Republicans, whether you voted Democrats, Independents, whether you're rich, poor, does not matter. Wildfire doesn't really care. And I think, again, we have this money. We know that investing in mitigation saves us millions in rebuilding and all of that. And I think, just to reiterate, it's run us our money. The money is allocated. It is there for a reason. We made historic investments under the Biden administration, and they helped everyone. It's not, the money isn't just going to blue states, it's going to every state. And I think really, Senator Broadman touched on it. It's rural communities are overly impacted by these climate threats, and they're going to continue to live with them with now less money, less resources to combat them.
Yeah. So we know we need a strong federal partner, but to some extent that's out of our control here in Oregon. So we do what we can with the resources that we have. Thinking about low-hanging fruit, what's some of the work that we can be doing to continue to bolster resilience for our community, keep our community safe during fire season? Something that runs through my mind, LandWatch as a land use advocacy organization, where we're placing homes across the landscape matters. So, a thoughtful approach to any future expansion. Sure, we have a lot of homes out in the forests and the more fire-prone areas. The hardening of those homes is critically important, but thinking about the future development, making sure that we're balancing real and practical fire risk with siting of homes, I think is important. What are some other practical solutions that folks have in mind for how we keep folks safe? Yeah.
So since some pretty significant fires in the 1990s, our community with the county playing a central role has helped to encourage home art, defensible space, building with wildfire resilient materials. We have done that through a lot of education, a lot of technical assistance, and funneling incentives. I mentioned all that federal money, funneling incentives to private property owners in our community. So we absolutely need to continue that. We need the funding support, to pass on to cost share with private landowners to get them to do the work that they need to do. But we have seen technical assistance and financial incentives help. They've helped get a lot of people to where they need to go. They haven't gotten everyone to where they need to go, and it is time to continue the incentives, continue the technical assistance and education, and think about requirements as well. That our state grappled with this recently and ultimately abandoned the requirements that they were going to create for home hardening, and it's now time for our local governments to step up and do what's necessary to protect people, not just on their own properties, right? The work you do on your own property helps to protect your home, but the work that you do on your property is critically important to your neighbor. You know, the most likely thing to light your house on fire is your neighbor's house. So we need not just a patchwork of home hardening across the landscape. We need solid blocks of home hardening across our community in order to make everyone safer.
Thank you. Senator Broadman, anything to add to that?
I would echo that, all of what Commissioner Chang said, and just say specifically on landscape resilience and community risk reduction, we need to invest more. What we did in the last long session was a great start. Hopefully $60+ million on a biannual basis going to community risk reduction and going to landscape resilience projects at the Oregon State Fire Marshal and the Oregon Department of Forestry. But I don't think anybody in that building thinks that we're done. And I will continue to fight for the resources we need at the state level to support OSFM and ODF to do the work that is going to save not just a home, but neighborhoods, and have those defensible spaces, of course, but have just defensible zones so that we have what we had at the flat fire, that southern edge of that running as quickly as it was towards Sisters, stopped because of landscape resilience. When I was standing in the perimeter of the flat fire, when it was still going, with our state fire marshal, we were looking at the private landowner's property who essentially had prevented that fire from running any further south. And so when you see it, it makes it really easy to advocate for the resources we need in Central Oregon to keep us safe. Thank you.
Can I add from this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so from the city perspective, some of our goals as the council around this are looking at, to Kathryn's point, making sure we're continuing to get people signed up for those alerts, understand how they can prepare, understand what they can do on their own property, and we're actually working on a big project now on how to get more engaged with the community and partner so that everybody understands their personal responsibility, but we're also facilitating pathways for people to achieve what they need to do on their property. And we're also looking at our local codes, right, to see what is it that we can do within our city codes that can respond to some of these concerns and help sure we're building for the future when we're building out the city. So I think all the local and state partners are doing their part, I think is what we're hearing at the table. And so, but we need those federal supports to make that something that's real. When we're asking all of our citizens and then you need to be doing this, and people are going, great, you told me what to do, I don't have the money to replace my roof, remove trees, whatever it is, we're gonna need more resources to make sure people can do that. And that's not gonna be able to come just from local government.
Sure, thank you. Councilor Osborne, anything you want to add from a Redmond perspective?
I'll just mirror what Mayor Kebler is saying, where we made resiliency a priority of our policy making, which it allows us to have those conversations around everything we're doing, whether it's placement of developments, making sure there's wildfire buffers around them, looking at code, working with the developers to talk about width of roads, how close houses are, what materials are being used, discussing with HOAs what access there is to funding for prevention, and then the education within the schools, through the fire department, through the districts. I really believe our communities have come together to hit this at every level, and the support needs to come from higher up with funding.
Thank you. Well, we're right at time, but it could be helpful to just wrap this conversation with any aha moments or parting thoughts, and just do popcorn and do a quick round. Senator Broadman, you want to start?
Well, I continue to believe that economic development hinges on people feeling safe in their communities. And economic development, private economic development, is what allows government to provide the services that our folks need and are entitled to. Wildfire is a huge portion of feeling safe in your community. If we don't solve for future wildfire chaos, we're going to suffer economically. I would just highlight one additional symbol of what this community has done. And that is the Core 3 facility, which Councilor Osborne, Commissioner Chang, Melanie, and Mayor Kebler have all been involved in. But that symbol of this community stepping up and being ready for the rest of the state in the Cascadia event, in a conflagration, when we need to stage fire assets in the middle of our state because the entire state is being pressed and being pushed and we're having shortages of assets. That is a great symbol, I think, of what our region does when we step up and take care of each other in this community and the rest of our state. So I know from the state perspective, again, on a bipartisan basis, this continues to be an existential challenge for us. And I'm encouraged by the investments that I've seen in the state. I'm going to keep fighting for it.
Thank you. How about you, Mickey?
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, these conversations are really important, and wildfire is not going anywhere. We're gonna have hotter summers, we're gonna have drier summers. That's the world we live in. And we need to ensure our communities have the resources they need to do the work that they want to do. They are willing to do the work. And I think especially after, the devastating 2020 Labor Day fires that we all have lived through, I think that was a real wake-up call. And I really hope we don't have another one of those to finally, okay, time to invest. Like we're doing the work, we know what works. We need to invest our dollars in that and make sure our communities have what they need.
Thank you. You got anything to add?
The town my parents live in, they're growing up there. It's a four-way intersection, but a two-way stop. And everyone in the community knew, like, they should really put up 4 stop signs there. They didn't until a wreck happened. Then it became a 4-way stop. I think about that with wildfire in the sense of everyone here on the ground knows, like, oh, it's just going to take for that canyon to light up. It's just going to take for that portion of the forest. And that's where these investments, especially in prevention in these communities, matter so much, because it's going to be X dollars, but if you don't do that, it's going to be 100 times more if a fire goes through there, or worse. It won't be a home burned down, it won't be a neighborhood, it'll be an entire community, and that's what 2020 taught us. We don't have really these what ifs anymore. We see the Darlene 3 fire, we saw like that forest treatment works. We saw with flat fire, defensible space, home hardening works. These things work, and it's folks on the ground telling us like, hey, these work, we should invest in it before, and if we don't, it's going to be exponentially more expensive or completely disruptive if we don't.
Thank you. Councilor Osborne, anything to add?
I would just say I'm really proud of Oregon and all of our leadership, bipartisan work. When it comes to wildfire, we come together. But more importantly, when it comes to disasters around the country, Oregon's public and private sector show up to help. And so we need to make sure we're not leveraging public safety as a partisan issue, and that we are funded and that we can take care of ourselves and take care of our neighbors.
Great, thank you. Bob, anything?
We talked about the impacts of climate, and that's very real. And we talked about the flat fire, which I view as a success based on all of these. When you look at the cohesive wildland fire management strategy, restoring and maintaining resilient landscapes, we had some good pluses there. We call that connecting the dots, especially when you look at the landscape against our forest. Creating fire adapted communities. That's a work in progress. But in certain areas, and especially in areas of the flat fire, we had great successes there also. And then safe and effective wildfire response. We live that in Central Oregon, all hands, all lands. And the support we got from the state legislature to beef up the budgets of Oregon Department of Forestry and Fire Marshal's office, we're seeing those results on the ground now. And we're providing a greater level of service to the entire state, not just Central Oregon.
Thank you. Commissioner Chang?
I would say wildfire is the existential threat to our community. And there is very little we have control of when we're talking about wildfire. We cannot control the weather on the day the fire starts. We cannot control when lightning is going to strike, when someone's going to be dragging their chain on their trailer on the ground and throwing sparks. One thing that we can control is where we build our homes and what the landscape around our homes is like, what the fuels are like. And homes are part of the fuel landscape. Homes are fuel in the right conditions. So those are the things that we can control, and we should be doing everything that we can to plan to make our homes, our communities as fire resilient as possible, and then making the investments necessary before the fire starts in order to make us as safe as possible.
Thank you. Mayor Kebler?
Yeah, I'm just really honored to be at this table with people just representing how we work together in Central Oregon and how we care about government doing good things for people's lives. And I think the core of this conversation, the reason why I got into office is I want to make people's lives better in Bend, in Central Oregon. I know that's what we all want. And we have to grapple with the concerns and the fears and the very real threats of wildfire and the fact that climate change is making that worse. So I think the takeaway for me is we are doing that work to try to make people's lives better in Bend, in Central Oregon, and across the state. We need our federal partners, and I'm grateful for our federal delegation because, as Senator Broadman said, they get it and they are doing that work. But we need everyone in DC to recognize they represent all of America, and the federal government is not a weapon to use to punish people that you think don't support you or didn't vote for you. You represent everyone. And Mickey said it, the fire doesn't care who you voted for. So I hope that our example here today can be a call to everyone else in DC that this is how you solve problems, and that government is supposed to make people's lives better. So let's get back to doing that.
Great. Let's end there. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate your insights. It's just so heartening to have a community as focused on keeping Central Oregon safe from wildfire as this group is. So, thanks. Yeah. We're going to transition to questions from the media.
Yeah, and we can either do that now, or if you guys want to do individual interviews, whatever is helpful for you.
Individual would be
Yeah, individual would be
Let's
good.
just do that. So let's
Perfect.